Family Roots. My name is Arlene Sachs. This is Sally Ann Sachs. And today we're pleased to welcome Sonia Rosa and her husband, Ali Bonilla. Welcome. This is a very interesting story. I found your name in the newspaper. Article. It was about DNA, and the thing that caught my eye was that you're related to a friend of ours from England, from London, England, Solihull Rock. And so I got your telephone number and we got in touch with you. You're from Puerto Rico.
Puerto Rico.
You've just recently found out that you have Jewish ancestors, and I think that whole thing is fascinating. And you found it out through the DNA studies.
Yes, I did.
Tell us about it. Tell us what you did. Start at the beginning.
Well, first of all, I was finishing my master's degree, and I was doing a master's degree on the history of the Taino Indians and their literature. And I was searching this group of kids that
Can
were...
I stop you? The Indians are from in Puerto Rico,
Yes,
I guess. Okay,
yes,
that's not a name that I know.
Yes.
Okay.
And a group of kids was sent to Carlisle Indian School in Pennsylvania after the Spanish-American War. And I wanted to find out everything about them, but I was very interested in their ancestry, in their genealogy. So I was able to trace about 10 or 12 of them. And after I did that and I finished my article on my master's degree and all that, I was just blown away by all the facts I was able to find out. So I decided that it was time to find out about my family, which was kind of a mystery because I only knew my grandparents and my family was not talkative about, the history of the family. So that's the way I started. When we reached that wall, and that the wall is when the genealogists can't find any more information, we found out that the registry in Puerto Rico in my hometown burned. I convinced my dad to have his DNA tested, and I paid for it. And he said, well, why not? Let's do it. And we did it, and it was just a pleasant surprise when we came back with that J2 haplogroup.
You have to explain what that is. For most people who are watching us haven't any idea what that word means or what the J2 is. So can you sort of briefly, either one of you?
Okay, let's go to Ali.
Oh, okay. Well, I had to learn also about the process because a couple of years ago I knew nothing, absolutely nothing, and those numbers and letters made no sense. But there are different patterns in our DNA, and they give us information on which ethnic groups we kind of came from. And so they call them haplogroups, and the J2 is linked to the Jewish population.
Yes, that came originally, that traces back to the Middle East, exactly to where Israel is. And the first test you did was not they have gradations. You can get, the more expensive test has more markers, because they do this thing called testing you on locations along the DNA string, I guess it is, and they call those locations markers, I think. And the first one you did told you what?
We did the 12 marker, and we found out 12 people that match exactly with us, and that's when we found Herb. Also, we found Roberto in Argentina, Saul Isroff.
And they were all Jewish, all the people you found?
Yes, and we were the only Puerto Ricans in the group, and they were from Europe, and they could trace their family to, 1700s, 1800s. They have strong genealogies and strong genealogy maps. And for us was a total surprise. They were very kind. They shared information with us. But the 12 marker was not enough. So we decided to...
The 12 marker tells you that you have common ancestors back how far in time? That's...
I think is more than 15 generations.
Yes, it's way back, so it's
very
imprecise. So it wasn't enough because you wanted more precise information?
Definitely, we were looking, we got involved or obsessed with finding that common ancestor. And so we decided to do a more precise test, a more ample test. And the 37 marker showed us like a precise space in Europe where the family probably came from.
How many years back?
Let's
okay, go ahead.
On the screen right now, all of those little dots there in Eastern Europe, that's all of the different places where you match to.
When you say where the family came from, doesn't it show you that that's where the common ancestor probably lived, 12 or 15 generations?
12 or 15 generations ago.
And the company that does the testing, Family Tree DNA, we've had him on the show too. they count 25 years as a generation for
Definitely.
their. So if we're talking 12 generations, we're talking 300 years
Definitely.
ago. So
1700.
1700. If we're doing 15 generations, we're back into the middle of or the early part of the 1600s, when this is where you had your common ancestor.
Definitely. And the more expensive and wider test cuts down on those generations and helps you, make that research, more detailed to pinpoint where you have to look at. And basically, we were looking at all Europe, and now we're looking at just two places, which are Belarus and Russia.
Russia proper, not further east? Oh, interesting. So, and you found that you have J haplogroup. When did you find this?
Well, we started together. We made it a family project, and it was, I think, the fall of 2004. We received the results. I was totally new at it. I could not make any sense, so I started asking questions. And the big surprise was for my father when I told him the results. And he was totally baffled. He was like, how reputable are these companies? We have no record. We come from a background of both, my grandparents were small farmers in Puerto Rico. The family story was, we all come from Spain. Everyone had been Roman Catholic, and that was all that we knew.
Do you know when the family moved to Puerto Rico?
No, we're trying to find out. I've been able to work my grandfather's records up to the mid-1800s up to now. For over a year, I had no matches on any of the databases. I was starting to feel like a rare bird. But not long ago, two other persons have matched. One, his ancestry goes back to our neighboring town in Puerto Rico, and he did say that, yes, in his family they had the verbal tradition that they had Jewish ancestry from Spain. The other person, he lives in the U.S. He's tracked his grandfather to the mid-1800s to Italy. So
Is he Jewish also?
Yes. So we just made these contacts. So we have, it's interesting where it's taking us and where we have to look to see when we can find a common ancestor.
I've been saying for a while, Sally, and I want to do something more on DNA because it's just so fascinating, and I was so glad.
The whole migration issue is
it's
so
all the patterns.
fun. And I'm just looking at the two of you, both from Puerto Rico. You both have J haplotypes. Your skins are totally different.
Totally.
Definitely.
And so you know that there's different admixtures.
Definitely.
But before the show we were talking, and I was saying, what's the significance of all this? Do we assume that your ancestor, Sonia, was, I'm going to start by saying, I will assume that Ellie's ancestor was a converted Jew, a secret Jew, living in Spain, who came to the Caribbean. His descendants came to the Caribbean. Maybe he came, I don't know, because we don't know when you came. But I also have this big book at home called The Jews of the Caribbean by Mordecai Arbel. And it lists Jewish communities all over the Caribbean in the 1600s and the 1700s, when the age of mercantilism in the Caribbean was very bustling. It was the center of commerce in the New World. And these other islands, however, were not Spanish. And so the Jews who ran from the Spanish Inquisition could settle on those islands and openly form Jewish congregations. So when I heard you were coming, I looked up to see, what does it say about the Jews of Puerto Rico? And it's this huge, the biggest island in maybe Cuba is, I guess. There's no Jewish chapter on Puerto Rico. There's a footnote that said because Puerto Rico was Spanish until 1898, Jews could not live there openly. So the question in my mind is, were your ancestors also originally from Spain? And does that mean that that whole group of our friends who think that they are Ashkenazi Jews, Eastern European Jews,
from Spain?
Were they originally from Spain? Had they migrated east?
We have to look at that probability,
Yes.
We have to throw that into
I think as family tree DNA gets more people's tested, then they can begin to see patterns. And I suspect that many of the Eastern European Jews, what we call the Ashkenazic Jews, originated in Spain and went north rather than just east.
We totally underestimate the capacity of these people for traveling. I
Yes.
mean, they were adventurers in that time and age.
Yes.
And they traveled quite
But
a lot.
not even adventures, they had to leave. As a
Well,
matter of
whatever
life
it
or
is,
death.
they did
Yeah.
move.
They had
That's
to.
the amazing thing when you read their lives. But the other thing that I'm waiting for, the new institute in Jerusalem that I told you about, the International Institute for Jewish Genealogy, is participating in an academic study of Sephardic DNA. And the results are supposed to come out at the end of this year. I would be fascinated to see if they have anybody who's an exact match for you. Because, that would really tell us whether your family came, whether this whole group that with our friends in it were Spanish originally. It's hard to know. If we don't find it, we won't know.
You've got a map now of Puerto Rico on there?
We have a map of the island of Puerto Rico. Both Sonia and I, our families, they're from the northwest corner of the island. That port in the 1700s was a major port.
Trading port. What's the name of it?
Aguadilla.
Yes.
That's the actual bay where Columbus actually landed on Puerto Rico. So that's the claim to fame of that coast, the Aguadilla
Okay,
bay.
so that was a major mercantile. I mean, it was a major. So that the possibility that you're talking converso Jewish merchants and traders would be much higher there.
Yes.
And then if they did go to be farmers, they went if
would
Spain
move
they
inland.
moved because Spain was maybe looking at people too closely, and they moved out of the way. It just
Not
makes
only
sense.
farmers, they came to trade on coffee in the 1700s. And rich people moved from Europe also, finding the riches that came from the coffee at the time.
Absolutely.
Coffee was big. And they were trying to establish the right import houses, And if you go to those towns and you see the historical buildings, they have German names,
It's very interesting because the Spanish, the royal model for economy was a monopoly. Spain controlled its ports. You cannot go without a royal permit, so they controlled the ports. But towards the end of the 1700s, we're discovering that there was a request from Prussia to have some commercial houses, and they were given authority to go to Puerto Rico, but interesting enough, not to San Juan, which was the main port. They were allowed to go through the smaller ports. So we're finding a lot of little sub-stories, smaller migration patterns that sometimes they get lost in the textbooks, but they're very important.
And you've joined a Puerto Rican genealogy group?
It helps us a lot. La Sociedad Puertorriqueña de Genealogía is her name, the Puerto Rican Society for Genealogy, and we share information with each other. And that's the way I was able to find one of my ancestors. Saturnino Rosa was my oldest ancestor, and he died in an accident at a sugarcane factory. And I put the names of the people I was searching for, and they found his death certificate. One of the fellow members shared the transcript of the death certificate that said that had the name of his parents
Right,
also.
so this was your grandfather or your great-grandfather?
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather. So now you know the names of your great-great-grandparents.
Definitely.
And again, I want to point out that the importance of a genealogy society. We keep pushing our Jewish genealogy society because we have certain problems, and your Puerto Rican problems are similar type, different but similar. That you need to work with the other people that are doing the same kind of research.
And you said that you recently learned that the Mormons have microfilmed records, census records that might help you, because you could go back. This is the farthest back you've been able to go
Yes,
so far.
1844.
And then you don't find any records.
No.
What? Were they burned or?
Yeah, there was a big fire in town, and the registry totally burned. But there's some records in Spain.
What kind of records in Spain?
The same records that they had in Puerto Rico, they have to do a double set. So
Oh, so you really could go back. You just have to go take your trip.
to Spain.
Be a good excuse to.
Well, you see, you don't have the excuse we have, which is we can't read the language.
But you know what they can do? They could go and they could do their research, and then they could report on it, and there'll be a tax deduction there.
Oh, absolutely.
You come and talk to the International Conference.
But let me tell you, just reading the handwriting, the convoluted
Right,
handwriting
but
at
the
the
more
time.
you do it, I can promise you, having done that, the more you do it, the better you get at it, because
That's
you
true.
get to know what these
The
funny
style,
squiggles are.
yes.
Yeah, you get to get used to a style of writing, and what I do when I had to learn Old German and when I was reading Hebrew script is I had a chart with each letter, and sometimes I'd have to sit and write each letter over the
That's a
letter
great
that's
idea.
written, and until I began to see the pattern.
Arlene taught herself Judeo-Alsatian, I think it was.
Judeo-German.
Judeo-German. She had these diaries that she were, you can do it, but it's hard. Ellie has a bunch of pictures. Did you find your pictures?
Is that your family?
These are pictures from Sonia.
Well, through the whole genealogy thing, we convinced everybody to have a family reunion last year.
Good.
So we have a family reunion of my immediate family. It's 5 girls, husbands, and my parents were there with grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and they
nice.
never thought they'd see something like that. So it's not a big family. It's only 22 of us. But everybody came and we had a great time.
That's
a great
rare.
time.
Well, years ago when I first began to do genealogy, the man who we called the father of Jewish genealogy in the United States was a Rabbi Malcolm Stern, who also researched the Jews of the Caribbean. And I asked him, I said, when you found Jewish roots for people who were not Jewish, how did they respond? And he said, if it was long ago, then it was exotic. If it was your grandparents and you didn't know they'd been Jewish, then it was like, Have you gotten any reaction from either side of your families in terms of, what do you mean we have Jewish ancestors?
In my case, it was very positive. It was a very pleasant surprise. When we did the test with my dad, I told him, it's going to come back either Spanish, R, which is R, or it's going to go Sub-Saharan, which is U. And I just explained to him the whole thing. And when he came back Jewish, he was just like, say what? Jewish? Have you seen the color of our skin? We Jewish, And it was just
Actually, if you go to Israel, your skin is not even dark by comparison to some others.
So it was just a fantastic reaction on his part. He was visiting last week, and we were able to exchange stories and record stories with our video camera. And I show him another way to find information from older people is to show them like older pictures.
Yes.
I bought this picture book from Puerto Rico, and he started telling stories when he saw the old pictures. One of them that was this lady dressed in white, and he was just like, this lady looks just like my grandmother, and he never mentioned his grandmother before.
That's fascinating.
And I found out, for example, which is really important, that that died of pleurisy, that he had a lung disease.
Yes.
So we know that's kind of hereditary since we all have asthma. Stuff like that runs in families, and you go, where it comes from? Well, you can trace it back also.
Well, that's interesting. But Ellie, how about your father? How did he react?
My dad was very shocked just because it was so unexpected. The family tradition was, we all come from Spain, small town farmers, and just the Roman Catholic tradition. So at first he was like, son, how reputable are these companies? Are you sure you're not being scammed? So it was fun also going to his sisters, my aunts, and explaining to them. And they were kind of shocked, and they laughed. And a year later, they're like, okay, well, tell us a little bit more about the Jewish side. And so after the initial surprise, they're having fun.
Which one of you said that you had some connection with the Canary Islands?
It's him.
Yes.
What do you know about what do you mean?
Well, from my grandmother from my dad's side, I also didn't know much about her. And through the internet and sharing family trees between the different organizations, we found a family tree that connected to our family tree. And this lady, she was very nice. Now we're genetic cousins, and we shared information. And we found out that my ancestry from that side comes from the Canary Islands. There's 7 Canary Islands, and we were fortunate the records actually mention which island specifically. It's interesting that it's in the 1700s where we trace them. We also find that in that island at that time, there was a very prolonged volcanic eruption that caused a migration. I think the volcanoes were active for more than 10 years, and the population had to move because they couldn't farm their crops.
Was there any tradition of secret Jews among any of those people? Because the Canary Islands are known as a place that the secret Jews moved to, and so I'm wondering if you hear any. You mentioned some. Who was this shoemaker that you mentioned to us before?
The shoemaker is
that's
my
from- that's
ancestor,
from
yeah.
her story.
On the Rosa side?
Yeah, on the Rosa side, there was this oral history that all the Rosas descend from a shoemaker, German shoemaker that moved to the western part of the island. He was a very handsome man, and he was kind of a womanizer, so everybody who had the surname Rosa was related to him. And I found the name of a German shoemaker. I don't know if it's my German shoemaker. His name was Hans Heinrich Rosa, and he arrived to Puerto Rico at the end of the 1700s, and he was a shoemaker. And that's all the information I have about him. But for us, it was just oral history. It was just folklore of the family.
You said you're a small family, but there are other Rosa families that you might be related to, but you don't know if you're
Yes,
related to?
definitely.
Have you begun to try to see if you can make connections with
As
these
of
others?
yesterday, someone wrote to me asking me about his Rosas from another nearby town to see if we can exchange information and see.
Are you
if
going to
we're-
get him DNA tested?
Oh, I'm going to try to. I'm going to try to because it gives you that extra piece of information
Sure.
that makes the whole world of difference.
I think I'm going to do it too. I have not done it yet.
Well,
I
what
wasn't
I'm
going
saying,
to, but you
this, you know, the family tree DNA, I don't know if Bennett Greenspan explained it to you, they do this thing called family groups, so that if you said to him, we want to do a Rosa group, first, the best thing is you get a discount on the testing. It becomes much cheaper. But then you maybe can say, listen.
We have our group,
You
and
do?
we have 5 people so far. But little by little, we're convincing family members to have the test done on different lineages of the family.
Oh, and then we know that Herb, how does Herb pronounce his last name? Herbshire?
Upshur. I don't pronounce it right.
Upshur.
Upshur.
Okay. He's going to be speaking at the Jewish Genealogy Conference in New York next month about your family group?
He has done quite an extensive research, okay? He is the administrator of that group, and they have an acronym, which is WIRTH, WIRTH,
Oh, right.
because the founders of the groups have those last names, Wolinski, Rosov, Upshur, and Tenenbaum. And the name stuck with the group is the WIRTH group. And so far we have 24 people that are a match. 5 of them are Levites.
Yes, and that's the other mystery too,
Yes.
because Ashkenazic, they should all be Levites because that's inherited on the father's side. But if only 5 of them are, how come? What's going on?
And of the group, everybody's can trace their family back to Middle Europe, but we are like the family mystery. The people from the little island of Puerto Rico that belong and are a perfect match, not only a good match, but there's like little mutations in my dad's DNA that is exactly like them.
So their task is to understand what it means in terms of the family history of migration that you are a member of this group. And I was thinking about that, and it seems to me that one possibility is that you descend from some Ashkenazic Jew who somehow found his way, maybe the shoemaker or whoever he is, found his way to Puerto Rico. But that was too early, maybe. And so the other possibility that comes to my mind is that maybe this whole Worth group really descends from Sephardic Jews who migrated east.
And in their paper that they're going to present, Sal Isroff and Herb Upshur are going to present that paper together. They explored that probability, and they look at those hypotheses to see, we have to research further. And now what they're doing is trying everybody to get the deep clay test, which is like a 60-some
But
marker
the other
test.
thing, if I were them, I would be sending you to Spain. I mean, that's really, from what you're saying, that's where you should be. Because if you can't find the records in Puerto Rico, but you know that duplicates are in Spain, the
You've got the
Spanish keep
language.
records way back.
Obsessive about the records. They
Absolutely.
are.
Get yourself there. Tell them they should all get up a collection and send you to go research this because it's their ancestry
laugh.
too.
She's right.
I'm serious. It's their ancestry too.
But let me tell you, researching in Spain, just from the other people from the Genealogical Society in Puerto Rico, it's quite hard.
What makes it so hard?
It's hard because there's like a bureaucracy around the papers, and you have to get into that slow pace. You know that here everything is fast paced, and there's like a slower pace, and sometimes you come and the priest is not there, and you have to wait until 3 days after he opens. Stuff like that. You have to be patient.
I have a cousin whose name is Stanley Hortus, who was a historian who found the secret Jews of New Mexico, and he's done this research in Spain. And if you ever want to do it, I'll just put you in touch with him, and he'll tell you how the advice.
I think that's the way
We
that
need
they
advice.
have to
Because
do it.
yes, he has people who help him in Spain, and he's developed a mechanism for.
Yeah, and I don't know whether he knows Spanish, but they're big advantage.
Yes, of course he
Oh,
does.
he? Well,
Oh, sure.
I mean, they
But
know
it's
the
your
Spanish,
family.
so if you did it for that whole group, and they sent
Nobody
you.
does your own research
better than you
do.
Yeah, better
But
than
I
you.
mean, they've got this group, and they're all interested in it, and you've got the
Right,
the
and
language.
Stanley has the whole bureaucracy in Spain geared up for his research, so you just slide into it.
Well, this has been, I think, one of the most fascinating to me shows that we've done
Thank
in a
you.
long time. Thank you so much for being
coming.
on it. We've got like 15 seconds. Anything you want to add? Real quick.
Well, genealogy is like an addiction. It's a passion. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
Well, that's why we've been doing this for a long time.
The bug bit you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sit here. I said.
Okay.